Hello again, and welcome to this edition of the Way to Indiecast. Once again, I am CJ Prince, a staff writer on the website, and I want to welcome, first off, my boss, the editor-in-chief and founder of Way to Indie, Dustin Jancic.
Hey, guys.
And I also want to welcome his first time appearing on the podcast. He is a writer as well as a video reviewer from time to time on his YouTube channel. And also a guy that I think right now we're all, Dustin and I are definitely very jealous of for reasons we will get into later. It's Zach Shevich.
How's it going, guys? Thanks for having me on.
So today we are going to go delve into some of the bigger things going on in the film world. First off will be the New York Film Fest, and specifically the premiere of Paul Thomas Anderson's Inherent Vice that just played. Zach is lucky enough to have seen the movie, so we will be pestering him about his thoughts. And then we will follow up with some talk about other films playing at the New York Film Fest right now. And then we'll go delve into a very in-depth discussion of David Fincher's Gone Girl, which we have all seen, and I hope we've all enjoyed to some degree.
Some degree.
Varying degrees.
Some degree.
Yeah.
And, once again, Bernard Boo is usually the man in charge of these podcasts, but he's actually quite busy right now out at the Mill Valley Film Festival. So for our listeners, please check out his coverage, his diary entries on the site, way2indie.com. He's doing a lot of great work out there right now, especially with Ananda Dhillon, our other writer/editor, who is going to go out and do some reviews as well. But for now, I'm just going to do a little icebreaker here. I'm going to throw it over to Dustin, who is going to be doing another edition of the Synopsis Scramble game. So explain to the listeners, I guess, what the game is, and then we can hop into it.
All right, yeah, and then this will be good for Zach because this is his first time on. So the rules are pretty simple. Basically, what I've done is I've selected 3 films, and I've scrambled their synopsis. So I'm going to read the synopsis, and I'm going to change important details like the names and locations with something different. And you guys will be trying to figure out which movie is being described. And as soon as you guys think you know it, just shout it out. You don't have to wait till I'm done or anything. Interrupt me halfway through if you need to. It'll be best 2 out of 3. Each round, I'll try to make it a little more challenging. I'll start with a little easier one to ease you guys in. And I figured since this episode of the Way to Indiecast is centered around David Fincher's Gone Girl, that I'd keep this Fincher themed. So that might make it a little easier. I try to switch up my synopsis a little bit with that in mind because it's a limited field there. I'm not able to pick just 3 random films. But we'll just go ahead and get started right away then with round 1. You guys ready?
Sounds good.
Okay. All right. A San Diego nudist transforms into a special agent who has little desire to track down the insomniac killer.
Zodiac?
Yes.
Zodiac.
Okay.
CJ just barely gets that in there.
Buzzer beater.
Buzzer beater, yeah. All right, so first round goes to CJ. All right, round 2. A broke man receives a Christmas present from his brother, and it's totally not what he expected. He doesn't even have an Xbox to play it on.
The game?
Yes. Oh my
God. Yes, the game. Was that you? That was Zach. Nice.
That's like the one Fincher movie I always forget about.
Yeah.
I like the movie, but I always like, oh crap, because it's just from so long ago.
Yeah, it's a Criterion Collection film too.
I just saw it like for the first time like not too long ago because that's like the one Fincher movie I always forgot about.
It is kind of a different one from him, I think, a little bit in some ways. So, but yeah, nice. I really kind of changed that one up quite a bit. To kind of try to trick you guys just a little bit. So
yeah, I couldn't think of any Fincher films where people play video games.
Yeah. Well, it's a 1-1. We got a tie going into the last round here. You guys ready?
Yes.
All right. Round 3. A married family welcomes in 3 friends looking to collect money they earned.
Panic Room.
Oh, man. That was how'd you do that so quickly? What gave it away?
I'd heard family and welcomes three men, and I was like, well, that sounds like a robbery, because
you gotta wait for my okay, so I just want, it's kind of funny, I think, the last line that I switched. So it goes, during the tour of their home they find an organic room. That was gonna
organic room.
Yeah, you know,
it rhymes.
Yeah, it rhymes. Yeah. So, but good job. CJ is the winner, 2 out of 3. But at least Zach got one of them. So that's good.
Yeah,
good job.
Not too bad of a first showing.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I won't gloat about my winnings, but I will instead lead my wonderful winnings. No, I will. We'll lead this into the New York Film Fest. You know, I mean, our last 2 Indiecasts were about the Toronto Film Fest, which is one of the big fall film fests. But what comes right after is the New York Film Festival, which I think is tends to be lacking its life in terms of they're more curatorial, they're more about quality in their main slate, but they get some really good premieres for their opening, centerpiece, and closing, and they knocked out the park this year because they got Paul Thomas Anderson's Inherent Vice for the centerpiece. So I'm just going to go straight to it. Zach, please get into Inherent Vice and tell us what you thought about it.
Well, it's a movie that there's a lot to discuss about it. It's a very, very dense movie, even compared to Paul Thomas Anderson's other works. It takes place in Los Angeles in the 1970s, early 1970s, in the wake of paranoia about the Manson family murders. So there's all this suspicion about cult activities and this active resentment towards hippie culture that our main character, the PI Larry Doc Sportello, the Joaquin Phoenix character, is immersed in. Just seeing him navigate all the mysterious world of Inherent Vice, it gets extremely confusing, extremely convoluted in a seemingly intentional way. The way that the things he knows sort of crumble beneath him and characters kind of cycle in and out of the movie is disorienting, but it gives a really interesting picture of the time and how people acted and interacted in the time. And while a lot of it sort of left me baffled, not really sure how to react to it, it's really compelling. It's completely engrossing. With Paul Thomas Anderson's direction, I think you get these really dynamic, understandable characters, amazing performances from a lot of really well-known actors in this too, and plus Robert Elswit's cinematography. So there's a lot of different things to react to, but in terms of assessing what it all means, I'm left sort of feeling the way I did when I first walked out of The Master, which is feeling of really wanting to see it again in order to get my head around it fully, because there's so much packed into it, and I don't even know where you start in a story like this.
Yeah, it certainly reminds me, just the way you described it, as something like The Master, where it's following 2 different almost plot lines. Like, is it like a look into sort of his wacky religion of Philip Seymour Hoffman, or is it like following this loner guy who, you know, is looking for a father figure, looking for direction in his life of some sort, where the plot line kind of wanders a little bit. This one sounds like even a little bit more than The Master, though.
Yeah, exactly. It's sort of set up as a modern noir in a sense, but we have the ex-girlfriend character that's mentioned in the trailer. She comes to visit Joaquin Phoenix in the opening scene, and she tells him about how she's been seeing this real estate tycoon who has a wife who's also seeing someone, and the wife and the lover apparently want to put the real estate tycoon into the loony bin to try and collect his money. And he's disappeared. Soon after that, she disappears, and the Doc character trying to piece things together. It's set up almost in a way where you expect it to be Chinatown, or you expect it to be sort of the classic noir detective who pulls together the links of the seedy underbelly. But that never really happens, even though the forward progression of the plot does sort of culminate in a way. It doesn't do it in a way that feels like it's closing the book on something. You don't really get a sense as to how they end up tying things together. You don't resolved in a understandable way. So it sort of leads you through all these interesting introductions to characters, very interesting personalities, and very irreverent guys. And it's hard to glean what it all means together, to be honest. It's a really intriguing movie, but piecing it all together is a little bit of a challenge.
So how would you rank it, like, in terms of some of his other work? Maybe even The Master, maybe even...
We've talked about this not on the podcast, but Paul Thomas Anderson's maybe my favorite filmmaker. I know you guys, or at least Dustin, is a huge fan of his.
Oh, yeah, one of my favorites, if not my favorite, yeah.
Yeah, you have There Will Be Blood and The Master reviews up on Way to Indie, and are speaking high praise of him. I don't know if I rank it that high compared to his other films, but I sort of felt the same way about The Master until I was able to see it again. Despite its large cast, it's not like the ensemble movies, Boogie Nights and Magnolia,
right,
where it's kind of sprawling and you get like an overall look at how these people's lives can sort of become intertwined. Sure. And it's not a deep character study the way that There Will Be Blood and The Master were. It's a lot more about the era and left me hoping for a little more of a visceral reaction. My main reaction and not just mine, it seemed like that was the majority response from everyone who got to see it at those early screenings, was confusion.
Yeah.
And intentional confusion, because that's what Phoenix's character is experiencing throughout the movie. It's still enchanting in a weird way, and I've talked to a couple people who actually went and saw the midnight screening to try and catch it a second time. They felt like it's a film that really benefited from that, from being able to go into it with a little more knowledge of it that second time and actually see what some of the intentions were for his movie.
So it kind of seems like they have more like disposable characters. You're kind of saying how much is like Owen Wilson even in it? Like, I know he's credited, but I mean, is he really just very secondary?
Owen Wilson's one of the more major characters. He plays this druggy saxophonist who disappears and reappears and disappears again in the ever confusing plot of Inherent Vice. But he gets 3 or 4 scenes. He's one of the more prominent supporting actors. Josh Brolin's the only person aside from Joaquin Phoenix that's in a lot of this movie. I think he's the only character we even visit in a scene outside of Joaquin Phoenix. Reese Witherspoon's only in 2 scenes. Jenna Malone is in 1. Michael K. Williams from The Wire's in 1. Catherine Waterstone's in quite a bit of the movie. She's sort of the MacGuffin at the center of it, but I thought she was...
Del Toro?
Oh, Del Toro was in only like 2 scenes also.
Oh, okay.
And he's great in them, but it's just these small parts, especially Martin Short, who he shows up and is just he's so lively, and he brings this completely different energy to the movie. He's this coked up dentist, and it's a really hilarious, just almost vignette in the center of the movie. But
and is it more like comedic than some of his other films? Like from the trailer, it was more like more comedic. Was it funny? Like was it?
It was definitely funny, but it was very bizarrely funny. The just absurd reactions some people would have, and things would unfold in ways that you don't expect them to. It's not quite as punchliney, I guess, as a Boogie Nights or something like that. It's more the irreverence of these characters that just is shocking in funny ways. And there were some moments in The Master where just the strangeness of Phoenix's character kind of leads to humor, and there's a lot of that in this. There's this one really short scene where he's mad at Brolin's character and starts flinging potted plants at him, and it's the funniest thing in the movie. So there are little moments like that, but it's not hilarious. It's not his funniest movie, but it's still a comedy.
Okay, so before we move on, would you describe this in terms of, I guess, maybe in general, or would you say it's pretty low-key? Like you said, it doesn't have the sprawl of, say, like Magnolia or Boogie Nights.
I guess that if you are comparing it to other PTA films that do keep the energy up despite how sprawling they are and how big they can seem, this one definitely has moments where it drags, and I don't know how much of that is just a result of sort of getting lost in the story. Probably a little more low-key, but there still is frenetic energy to some of the pacing.
Yeah, I think we'll leave it there because, I mean, I'm kind of I mean, as much as I love the trailer and all that, I'm kind of still hoping to. I was gonna read the book, and I'm like, no, I'm just gonna watch the movie because
I mean, you still got 2 months, it looks like, until most people are gonna end up seeing it.
As we could spend this whole time talking about Inherent Vice, but I figure, and I mean, we should mention that you have a capsule review of Inherent Vice up along with several other reviews. That you guys that anyone listening can check out on way2indie.com. So I don't know, maybe we can go in and talk about some of the other films you've seen at the New York Film Festival. If you want to talk about any other, say, highlights or even lowlights, if you wanted to.
Totally. Well, I do have my review up of Time Out of Mind, which is the new film from Oren Moverman, who's already done The Messenger, which I liked a good amount, and then Rampart, which I actually missed. But this film was a bit of a disappointment. It's Richard Gere as a homeless man in New York, and it just sort of has a strange style to it where they intentionally obscure a lot of angles and play his character in the background of a lot of scenes, and it becomes very draining by the end. So it's not a movie that really worked for me, but you can read more about that in my review. I also saw Red Army, which is this documentary about Slava Festinov, who was one of the members of the 1980 Russian Olympic team, which lost in the Miracle on Ice hockey game. And that was a really exhilarating documentary. It was funny and quite informative. I was quite surprised by it. But one of my more favorite films from the festival so far has to be the new Dardenne Brothers one, which is called 2 Days, 1 Night. I don't know the French pronunciation.
It's, but Deux Jours une Nuit or something like that. I'm not terrible at French, but yeah.
So yeah, it stars Marion Cotillard, whose name I always feel like I mispronounce. Also, as a woman who, in the events prior to the film, has been laid off from her job after her coworkers vote in favor of €1,000 bonuses for themselves against her continued employment. But she manages to convince her boss to hold a new vote at work on Monday, so she has the weekend to see each of these coworkers individually and essentially ask them to vote for her to get her job back. And I know CJ got to see this one in Toronto, right?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. So it was one that I found really effective. I was really struck by the authenticity of the characters. I like the film quite a bit, but I'm curious to see what your reaction was to it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've seen a good amount of films by the Dardenne brothers. I think this is their best one since The Sun. It's really, you're right, it's very effective. Marion Cotillard is great. I do like this is one where I think their films are high concept. Plot works tremendously. I mean, there are some really great scenes that happen in it with her interactions coming up to each coworker. I think the best one, you might agree, is probably, I don't want to spoil what happens, but when she goes to one of her coworkers who's in a soccer field, and that interaction just kind of bowls you over.
Well, that interaction specifically, I think, is so smartly placed because the film is really tense. Just these conversations are so uncomfortable to watch people have, and it comes at a point when you kind of need a change of pace in a way. It relieves tension in such an effective way, and the Dardennes managed to make it not too draining of a film, not too overly sad of a movie.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that the pacing is one where it works really well because it does make sure that it doesn't stay, I guess, in one gear. Like that's a bad image, but it always changed itself. And also the achievement of the movie is that they nail the ending down perfectly in my eyes. I think the ending's perfect.
Yeah.
Before we move on to Gone Girl, you and Dustin talked about, this is one I did not catch at Toronto, which I am kicking myself for because it's been getting so much buzz since Sundance and Cannes. Whiplash, if you and Dustin could maybe talk about that, because I think you two feel a little differently on it.
Yeah, what's your reaction, Zach?
Well, I was really swept away by it. I mean, I think just the dynamic between Miles and J.K. is so kind of engulfing and electric. It's such a well-acted film, and the J.K. character keeps you on edge throughout. For those who might not know, Whiplash is the story of this aspiring jazz drummer who's at the top music conservative in the country, and he gets plucked from his band into the top jazz band at the school where J.K. Simmons plays Terrence Fletcher, this completely intimidating instructor of the jazz band who berates and insults his musicians until they, cry or leave. And in terms of the pursuit of perfection that sort of runs through this movie, it sort of reminded me of a couple other films that have come out recently, particularly Black Swan. And I was really struck by how Miles Teller performed as the character of Neiman. It's not something that I've seen from him before. He's usually much more aloof in his films, but the determination is something I could just really feel through the performance. And the editing particularly is so kinetic and fast-paced, and it's cut together like an action movie. And for those chaotic jazz scenes, it's a perfect fit. So I kind of found myself swept up by it, even though there's, I guess, more minimal story, and then the third act drags quite a bit. It's a crowd pleaser, but I found it so effective and really, really satisfying.
I like how you use the word drag there, because there's that famous, or it's not famous, but if you've seen the film, there's one scene that'll really stick out, which is the rushing or dragging scene, which seems to go on a little bit too long in my opinion, but I think as a whole, I maybe was a little more disappointed with the film maybe than you were. As I mentioned when I saw it at TIFF on my review on Way Too Indie, Whiplash is definitely going to be the best film you see about drumming all year.
Absolutely.
That's all it is. I mean, they spend like the whole time in the drum studio essentially, which is fine. Miles Teller and especially J.K. Simmons are both at the top of their game, like you mentioned. And they really, I think, make the film. They make it energetic, sometimes inspiring, to be the best that you can be, and that's really what the film's about, like you had mentioned. Great performances, and I agree with, the editing is fantastic, very quick, very energetic, and the soundtrack obviously really helps. But I found it a little bit predictable. And there's a love story in there that's really half-baked. They sort of introduce it and dismiss it. I think that could have been developed just a little bit more. Maybe it was, because it is based on a book, I believe, and the script was on the blacklist, I think 1 or 2 years ago. So it's this really good story, but I don't know. I guess it got a lot of raves from Sundance and Cannes, like CJ mentioned, but I think maybe I was a little underwhelmed about what I saw.
This might be a apt time to mention that I did a little bit of jazz drumming in high school, so there's a little bit of a personal connection that made me like it quite a bit. But I mean, it is a somewhat narrowly concerned movie. Yeah. But if you,
it's good in what it shows, but
I mean, it's maybe the best version of that story I can imagine.
Oh yeah.
But
if you're gonna do a whole movie on jazz drumming, they do a pretty interesting, for someone who isn't into that, they do keep you somewhat interested the entire time. It's not boring in any way. No one will describe the movie as boring, I wouldn't think.
Yeah, it's not something you have to be a jazz fan to like.
Yeah, predictable maybe, but not boring. It's definitely energetic, and it is fun. I think it is a crowd pleaser, and I think I'm probably in the minority just a little bit, because I think a lot of people walk away feeling a little inspired and enjoying themselves with the watch. So I would still say to most people, I think they'll find themselves enjoying the film.
Yeah, I am excited to see it. I'm not sure. Do you guys know if when Whiplash is coming out? I think
it comes out October 10th in New York and LA, and then slowly expands. So right. I think its big expansion is on November 1st, but all of that is on the Sony Picture Classics website.
So
yes,
yeah, it's definitely pushing for some sort of award season push a little bit.
I could see JK totally being in that conversation.
I could, definitely for Golden Globes for sure. Yeah, maybe even maybe even the Oscars. I really see the film doing well at maybe the Independent Spirit Awards. I could see it really doing well there.
We'll find out, I guess. I don't know. I mean, maybe a
couple months.
Yeah, with the public reaction, because it seems to be doing quite well. But another New York Film Fest title.
It's the opening night film.
Yes, the opening night film. It just opened this weekend all across America in theaters, and it actually is now the #1 film in America. Made a nice chunk of money. It exceeded expectations. This is, of course, David Fincher's Gone Girl, starring Ben Affleck and Rosamund Pike. Yeah, so for those who don't know, which I think is probably not that many now because it's been so popular, but it's based off the best-selling novel by the writer Gillian Flynn. It's about a couple, Nick Dunn, played by Ben Affleck, and Amy Dunn, played by Rosamund Pike. Basically, one day Amy goes missing, and Nick comes home to find that their house is in a mess, and his wife is gone on their 5th anniversary. He calls the police, and they start investigating, but then suddenly things, as I think they usually go with these kinds of films, are not as they seem, and things get quite twisty and quite interesting as things go on. It's very hard to describe, to talk about the film, without getting too spoilery. We are going to have a section towards the end of the podcast where we're kind of just going to let loose and go crazy on the spoilers, so we will give you ample warning for when we start that. So don't worry, we will not be ruining anything for you.
It's super hard to talk about without spoiling. Like, it's so hard. You can say very little about the film.
We'll give it a shot.
Yeah.
But either way, like, just to let the listeners know, we are not going to spoil the movie for you. We promise. We will give you a lot of heads up so when we get into that. But for now, I'm gonna let Dustin, you start. Tell us what you thought about the movie.
Well, there's obviously a lot of hype about the film. It's a David Fincher film, and I got a lot of good reactions out of New York Film Festival. I mean, did you hear the same while you were there, Zach? I mean, was everyone just buzzing about it?
Everyone was definitely talking about it and really, really excited about it. Not to mention just having the press conference there afterwards tends to influence people a little bit.
I was a bit underwhelmed by it by the end. I thought it was a good but not great sort of whodunit mystery film, and it featured, I would say, definitely 1 or 2 great performances. It had a lot of fun twists and turns, which, like I said, makes it really difficult not to talk about because that's kind of the whole point of the film. And it's done really nicely by David Fincher. I mean, as he tends to do, the cinematography's great. But to me, the ending was a little unsatisfying, not enough to ruin the entire film, but it was enough for me to leave with sort of like a shrug on my shoulder, just kind of like okay, like, this was a good film. It was fun. I'm not sure if it was worth all the hype that I got, and I don't know if all the hype influenced me a little bit, and I was expecting maybe a little bit more, but I knew very little going in, and that's how you should see the film, is knowing not too much. But yeah, overall I would say I was underwhelmed.
Yeah, I wasn't quite as dissatisfied with the ending as you, and I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit more when we talk about spoilers at the end of this discussion.
Yeah.
But you mentioned the technical aspects, and for me, that was one of the ways that the film really, really excelled. I mean, the pacing is really, really interesting in the way that Kirk Baxter edits this. There's all these flashbacks, and you're juggling timelines, and there's these cuts that are fade to blacks that at first I wasn't really particularly enjoying, but when you see the way that it's able to help keep the film kind of slower while not dragging, and how they use it to stitch together the different timelines, it worked on me. And not to mention Jeff Cronin with cinematography, which is always really striking. Fincher is one of those directors who's on the forefront of the digital versus film argument, and he's adamantly in favor of digital and uses the Sony Red camera on a lot of his films. And just the way that they shoot the characters in such a cold way, in such a seemingly disaffected way, I found cool in a weird way.
And let's not forget about the soundtrack by Trent Reznor.
It was their best collaboration yet between Trent Reznor, Atticus Ross, and David Fincher. I don't know. I really like the kind of I guess David Lynch, Angelo Badalamenti-esque music cues for like the flashbacks and when Nick and Amy are together, and then the kind of distortion and other effects they used, in the present day narrative. I Yeah, I mean, I actually was surprised because with The Social Network and Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, I remember I wasn't as I didn't pick up on the score as much. This one I definitely picked up on it a lot more. I actually enjoyed that aspect quite a bit. There's a term someone used about David Fincher that I would agree with, which is that I think David Fincher has a very certain type of brand, and he does it incredibly well. And so whenever he makes a movie, he's always going to get a lot of favored responses. David Fincher's has kind of a ceiling for me. I like his films. I think he's a very consistent filmmaker. However, none of them have really broken through and been the kind of amazing masterpiece, the kind that people really go crazy for. So I know Dustin was a little disappointed with this. This kind of matched my expectations. I enjoyed it. I had a fun time with it. I was surprised at how funny it was. Because I've read the book, and the book did not have that kind of comedic, twisted, dark humor tone that I think Fincher really did a good job with in the film. It's not one of my favorites of the year, but I think it's a very good film.
But is it a great film?
It's
because I thought it was a good, not great. Like I talked more bad about it. I enjoyed it too.
Line.
Yeah, but did you guys see it as a comedy? Like, did you guys see the comedic elements?
I saw it as a very horrifying domestic abuse film. I did not I didn't laugh too much at all.
Oh man, my audience, I was so happy with the audience was that because they were laughing.
Really?
Especially towards. There's you guys will know when I mention this. There's a line Tyler Perry says at one point towards the end that got huge laughs from the audience because it's a great line. And yeah, I mean it was this kind of nervous laughter,
maybe some of that.
You're kind of like, oh my God, what's happening? So I mean, the people are laughing along with it, I guess, because reading the book, it has a more serious tone to it.
I had a similar audience as CJ's. There was quite a bit of laughter, and afterward, seeing it at New York, there was the press conference following the screening. Fincher described it as a satire, which was interesting to hear it from him as a director who is particularly not comedic in most of his work, even though there's comedy influences, where he fully embraces that aspect of it. I looked at it as a thrilling comedy more so than a comedic thriller, not to mention the twists that we might get into. Should we get into it yet?
Yeah.
All right, yeah. So okay, let's do it. For the readers, this is the point I told you about, the point where we warn you. Did I say readers? I think I said readers. The listeners. This is the point where we're gonna get deep into the movie. I guess we're gonna get a little more friendly with the spoilers. So yeah, we're gonna have a little break point here. So you guys will have no excuse to turn it off.
Your last chance.
Your last chance.
Unless you've seen the film and you want to hear.
Yeah, if you've seen the film, stay here. Don't turn it off, please. Stay here. If you haven't seen the movie, stop this. Go out, see Gone Girl, come back, and hit resume. That's what you should do. We'll be right back in a few seconds.
You're listening to the Way Too Indiecast, the official podcast of WayTooIndie.com, where you'll find film news, reviews, and interviews with an emphasis on indie. Follow us on Twitter at WayTooIndie and like us on Facebook.
All right, welcome back. So yeah, let's. I think we'll just hop right into this for the spoiler discussion. I'll just start off with this. At my screening, as I was telling you about the audience reaction, I think the highlight for me was after the scene where Amy slits Desi's throat and has that very gory set piece. This girl behind me turned to her friend and she just whispered, "This is the craziest fucking bitch I've ever seen."
She was great in the film. She was magnificent.
She's great. I think my main issue with the movie, and this is because I did read the book, the book has a somewhat similar structure, but they changed it. And I think for the first half especially, I had issues with the first half. I enjoyed it much more, I think, starting the point where the people that Amy was staying with robbed her. That was where I started to liking the film a lot more. The book is split up, so it's two different narratives. So there's Nick. It's Nick's narrative, and he's talking. They're both first person narratives. So it's Nick's perspective and then Amy's, and it switches back and forth. In the first part of the book, it's Nick present day after Amy disappears, and then it switches back and forth between that and Amy's diary entries. In the second part, suddenly Amy spills about everything, reveals that the diary entries are fake, and you realize the extent of what she's doing. And then but the thing is, I liked a lot in the book how it was split that way and how it was Nick's first person narrative in the book, because when you start out, you like in the movie, you have your sympathies with Nick, you feel bad for him, all of that, but then you realize in the book as you read that he starts showing off how much of an unreliable narrator he is. He suddenly is not mentioning certain things until they come up later, and then you start like reading the book. I remember I was like, this guy's an asshole. Like, I don't like this guy. He's proving himself to be this really horrible guy. And then you read Amy's diary entries and you're like, you feel bad for her and all this stuff. And then right when you get to the point where you're just totally, you want to write Nick off, then they throw in the second part and they reveal the truth.
And so that might be the big difference, like in the film, because I never felt like Nick was this horrible I mean, he's not a good person by any means, and he even admits eventually that he made a mistake and he cheated on his wife, but I never really sort of resented him in like a big way. And maybe the book did a little bit better job of sort of making him seem just as bad as Amy. I don't know, but I never felt that way.
I think I'm in a similar boat as you. I don't know how much that affected my my enjoyment.
I don't think it affected mine either.
It was interesting that it didn't necessarily paint him as poorly as I guess the book did, and that the way we ultimately think of Amy is much worse than how we ultimately feel about him. But I got enough of a sense that we're not supposed to like him that I think that did work for me.
Right.
Yeah, I think, but yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, in the movie, it's just because Nick doesn't have the first person narrative that Amy does in the film, because you're seeing it through her diary entries, and because Nick has more of that kind of third person omniscient kind of thing where the camera's just observing him, it gives off, you align with Nick, so it is harder to dislike him, and the way that and it doesn't have much of an impact because, in the book, when you suddenly realize that Nick is lying to you as a narrator, that's more of I think of a betrayal than in the film where you just notice that he's not telling the cops, for instance. It doesn't have that, I guess, personal aspect to it that the writing had. Yeah, no, and actually it's funny how you brought up the edits, Zach, with the fades to black and all that, because I actually didn't like that at all. I thought it was very clunky the way that they handled the transitions between the flashbacks and present day, but that's just me. I mean, I just did not.
Yeah, I guess I didn't feel either way. I didn't feel like I enjoyed them or I hated them. I thought they were fine, I guess. What I found that was really interesting was that Gillian Flynn actually wrote the screenplay too. So it wasn't like they just adapted this book and someone wrote a screenplay off this book. She did it herself. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. I didn't really even know that.
I'm curious what you think, CJ, because there was something that struck me from the press conference. Fincher was talking about how he was approached with the idea to adapt Gone Girl, and he didn't really want to get involved until he had read the script. And when he did, Flynn's script had killed all the darlings, which for anyone who doesn't really understand the phrase, it's trimming all the fat, essentially. And I found the movie to be pretty lean, to be pretty good on giving you just the information you need, not too much, not too little.
Yeah.
Did you feel the same, CJ, knowing that there's possibly more to the story from having read the book?
Yeah, no, I think that actually, I think I'd put the book and the film on par, but they are different. I think Gillian Flynn did a very good job writing the screenplay, adapting it, because it is a more compressed version. She cuts out a lot. But it's not major stuff. She's really just trimming things, but in a way that's very sensible. I think the best example would be the mall, the abandoned mall in the city that kind of factors into the first act of the film.
Yeah.
That, for instance, that has a much bigger role in the book. It is described thoroughly. It was where Nick's mom worked. And actually what happens is when they get that development about Amy buying the gun, it was actually Nick and Amy's father who went with a gang of people in the town to find it, because they thought the people in the mall might have taken her and they were going to fight them and get the truth and stuff. And I thought it was just a very smart decision that by taking that, by just compressing it to simply it's just a part of Boney and I forget the other officers' names, their investigation. They go to the mall, they interview people, and they find out. That to me is just a very smart way to compress an aspect of the novel while still retaining the kind of very essential narrative information. The book has a more dour tone to it, The recession factors in quite heavily. There's a lot of talk about, like where America is nowadays in the post-recession. A lot of talk with the failure because of Nick and Amy losing their jobs.
I thought that was hammered pretty hard, actually. I thought
it's hammered. It's much hard in the book because it delves into like the mall and all these aspects of the town and how the town is kind of like this dead zone, business is shut down and stuff. Whereas Fincher in the film, he kind of just, in a way, window dressing, it sets the mood, it sets the atmosphere, it's not dwelled on.
That's what I mean by much. I felt like the mall was just sort of like thrown in there almost, because like I never even made that connection with like maybe in the book that he just sort of sets it up a little, or she sets it up a little bit more.
Yeah, no, in the book, the book is just part of the town, it's part of the setup. In the film, it has this much smaller role. I think the one thing that everyone's coming away from, which is people love Rosamund Pike. This is kind of her big breakthrough role. I'm very happy. I've been a big fan of her for years, and I'm glad she got a big role like this. What did you guys think of her performance?
I thought she was excellent. If there was, like when I mentioned there was one or two good performances, I honestly didn't feel like Ben Affleck was all that great. I thought he was good, maybe replaceable, not bad, but Rosamund Pike is unreplaceable here. She dominates the film, and I think she did an extraordinary job. I definitely think she could be walking away with some nominations come award season time.
Absolutely. She becomes so frightening by the end of it. Mm-hmm. And there's just this quality to her face that she has this poker face almost, the blankness in some of her expressions where you can't really read what she's trying to communicate in a way that's very mysterious. So I think she worked really well. And I know Reese Witherspoon bought the rights to the novel hoping to play the Amy Dunn character.
Really?
And just considering that, it's so much better. We're so much better off for having Rosamund Pike in the lead. Just the mysterious layers that were added just through that performance. I feel like even the fact that she's doing the fake American accent adds a bit to her inauthenticity, and the fact that this is a character that's sort of been created rather than being the real Amy Dunn. So I was really blown away by her performance. I was expecting to be surprised by Neil Patrick Harris and Tyler Perry, who I both thought were really good, Kim Dickens, who I thought was really good, but she was really a good deal of why this movie worked.
Yeah, I agree. Like she goes from one extreme to the other, and she definitely portrays it on the screen perfectly. Like you said, going blank. Sometimes you don't know what she's thinking, and she portrays that very well. Like she's just a messed up person who doesn't really have. There is no Amy. She's sort of like a bipolar person who's just off the wall, and you never know like where she's at. Neil Patrick Harris frightened the crap out of me. He did a great job, and Tyler Perry, I never thought I would say it, but he was actually really good.
Fincher did a great job of casting both against type and to type.
Yeah,
here.
With Neil Patrick Harris as a straight dude. That's crazy.
Exactly. Who would have thunk of it?
As a scary straight dude.
Also just want to mention Carrie Coon, who plays Nick's sister Margot, who actually that was underrated, and she was also, I think, the best adapted character from the book. She definitely that was the most to me that resembled the book the most. I like Rosamund Pike a lot as well. I think what really helps with her performance is she gives as much as you're terrified of Amy, as scary as she is, you get the empathy from it. You can, even though you think Amy's crazy, you still can understand where she's coming from in a way.
I have a capsule review up on Way Too Indie. I believe Bernard has the full review up as well.
Yeah. Bernard has the full review.
So you got a couple opinions from us that you can check out on the site.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm just going to throw this in very quick. This is probably impossible to be quick about, but I think we have to mention it because Dustin brought up earlier the ending. The ending is actually, they said it was going to be changed, but that was actually wrong. It's pretty much exactly as the book's ending. It just has some tweaks to it, but it's pretty much the same. I wanted to know, just quickly go around what you guys thought of the ending, because Dustin, you said you didn't really care for it.
Yeah, I understand sort of the idea of how these are two bad people who maybe are meant to be together, and sort of this whole thing about domestic abuse and maybe even marriage as a whole, and being unhappy, two unhappy people with each other, just stuck with each other. And I don't know, I felt like he really wanted to leave, and he made that pretty clear. And he even had another relationship with another girl who just fizzled out, at least in the film. It still seemed like he should have just left, just walked away, say, hey, okay, great, now we've been together for a little while, we she's back, okay, now I'm ready to leave because I've already admitted I'm in a different relationship. I didn't like that part where he's just like, okay, yeah, I guess we're gonna have a kid, and I guess I'm stuck with you.
You see, that's the thing, because what it is saying is that yes, Amy is far worse than Nick in terms of who's the badder person, I guess, but they are two very damaged people who deserve each other, and it's about how they play roles to other people. Amy wants to play this role of the perfect couple, and that's why she wants Nick, because she can mold him and make him, and that's why she decides to go back to him after she sees his interview, because she sees, that's the man I want him to be, and then she goes back because she knows that he's the right man for her, because he can.
But what in your mind kept him staying there then? Like, I kind of
kept
see
him
that
staying
from her.
there is that he wanted her. He actually, he liked Amy, and he did want her. He did like.
I thought he was terrified with her. We wouldn't sleep with her even. He wouldn't even be in the same room.
He is, but he also got tucked in by her. He's basically like, she says to him that, if you went with someone else, you would be bored. This is what you want. This is what you like.
Yeah.
And that's what happens with Nick. Zach.
I can understand where you're coming from, Dustin, but for me it worked.
Sure.
I think it's such a wickedly entertaining film for most of its duration that to have had a cleaner ending might have felt out of place. And
sure. That's true.
I liked the implication of the ending, that these two are just set to live this messed up, fucked up life with their kid and playing roles for one another.
It's a fair point. It kept with the tone of the film. I'll give you that for sure. Totally.
I liked the feeling it left me with. It wasn't I can't say it's like a satisfying ending, but it left me with this feeling that I'm glad that the film affected me in that way, and it probably wouldn't have if that ending was a little more clean.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. That's a fair point.
Yeah. Okay, so I figured we have to talk about the ending, because I know that everyone who watches it, that ending definitely.
It got a loud groan from the theater I saw it in when I saw it a second time.
I groaned at
their groan. A lot of people were unhappy about it.
Yeah, I most of the audience, I think, that I saw was kind of maybe with me a little bit. Like, obviously this isn't a film you're gonna sit up and clap for or cheer for, but everyone was kind of like, was like, oh, that's it. It just sort of ends, and you're just kind of like, oh, okay, it's not necessarily a satisfying ending, and I don't like those endings. I don't like neatly tied up ones. To me, it was hard for me to believe that this guy who went through all that, who said, God, you're a bitch, like, to her ear, like, when she shows up, and like, to me, like, it felt like unrealistic to the story. But I do feel like I agree with you. It's totally on point with the rest of the film. It's very unsettling, and in that case, you kind of walk out of the theater that way, and that's kind of what the film was going for. So I will give you that for sure.
Yeah, and I do personally, I love that Amy gets away with it, and the reason why she gets away with it and why she's so good at what she's doing is because she knows the roles that people play in society, and she knows, by playing these roles that people will easily fall for, by playing the battered wife when she's at that resort place, by playing the sad marriage, all these roles. I totally like it. But as we mentioned, read Zach's review on the site, his capsule from New York Film Fest. Read Bernard's review. For now, we'll close the floor. No more spoilers.
Hey guys, what's your favorite Fincher movie?
Yeah. That's what we're going to close with. Go around. We figure we'll just talk. What's your favorite Fincher movie? I'll start with, Zach, you go ahead.
Well, for a lot of years of my life, the answer would have been Fight Club. But that's totally a cliche. I've grown out of that, and I really, really have a deep appreciation for Zodiac. It's just such a haunting movie, and he's always been kind of a master of the design of a film, and I think that's just a prime example of how the film cinematography kind of only just enhances the story in an unbelievable way. So for me, it's Zodiac and Seven are kind of that top tier.
For me, I would say I think my favorite is Seven. I like the term. I think I'll refer to David Fincher as a dark master. He's a very dark director, and I feel like Seven for me was that kind of perfect marriage of form and content, because it is such a very grueling, negative, like dark film. And how about you, Dustin?
he's this dark director, like you said, who loves detective stories. He loves the nitty gritty with Gone, or Girl with a Dragon Tattoo, I guess now kind of Gone Girl, Zodiac. But yeah, I agree. Seven is quite amazing. I would say it's probably my second favorite. I'm gonna, cliche or not, I think Fight Club is just amazing. A lot of films I think borrow sort of the crazy twists and some of the stuff that's shown in the film. And as much as I see it, I still find new things in it all the time, and I don't know, I love the film, so it's hard for me to dismiss that one.
So I think that that about wraps it up for this edition of the Way to Indiecast. Just a quick recap. We talked about the New York Film Fest. Zach, you saw Inherent Vice, and
the enigmatic Inherent Vice.
Yes, the enigmatic, the film that we are all, well, Dustin and I, since you've already seen it, we're all dying to see. You're probably dying to see it again.
Yeah.
Yes.
Nice.
And then we also talked about 2 Days, One Night, which is another, I think, good entry in the Dardenne Brothers filmography. I believe that's coming out at the end of the year from IFC Films. Whiplash, which Zach, you loved, not because of your background in jazz drumming.
Not exclusively.
No. Dustin says, out of all the drumming movies you've seen this year, Whiplash is the movie you need to see. That's coming out this month, and will expand in November from Sony Pictures Classics. Also talked about Time Out of Mind, or Moorman's movie, which I don't know if that has a release date yet. I don't even think it has a distributor.
I don't believe it does.
But and then as everyone just heard, we had quite the chat about Gone Girl. We all liked it to varying degrees. And so, Zach, where can we find you online on the social media, the Twitter, the Facebook?
I am at the Twitter at Zshevich. That's Z-S-H-E, V as in Victor, I-C-H.
You have YouTube reviews.
Oh, right, the YouTube reviews, yeah. That is youtube.com/multiplex show. So we post 1 or 2 weekly kind of concise videos that you can check out. We have our Gone Girl review up there as well, so if you want more spoken words on Gone Girl, you can check that out. Yes,
very nice images. Yes, and Dustin,
you can find me on Twitter at djansick. That's DJANSICK.
All right, and for the listeners, you can find me on Twitter at CJ_Prin. That's CJ_PRIN. As for our lovely website, you can check us out on Facebook. You can check us out on Twitter at Way2Indie. Please come to our website, www.way2indie.com, where we've had all of the features and goodies and reviews we've mentioned, and we have plenty more. We have a lot of coverage coming up at the Mill Valley Film Festival, and always have reviews, interviews.
I'll be down at the Philly Film Fest too, so those as well.
The Philadelphia Film Fest. It's festival season. There's so many going on. Yeah, so be sure, if you've listened to this through iTunes, please subscribe to us. Please rate us. So long from us, and keep watching movies.